Long before Cahaba became a ghost town, people feared the river, not because of what lived in it, but because of what walked beside it. The old stories say that if you're ever lost near the ruins after dark, you may see a lantern glowing through the fog. If you do, don't call out, don't wave, and whatever you do, don't let the lantern stop for you, because according to the legend, the man carrying it has been searching for the same person for more than 100 years. Back when Cahaba was Alabama's first capital, there lived a ferryman named Elias Crow. Every evening he carried a lantern to the river. Travelers trusted that light. On foggy nights, it was often the only thing separating safe passage from disaster. Elias was known throughout the town, reliable, honest, the kind of man who never turned away someone in need. For nearly 20 years, he guided strangers across the river, and for nearly 20 years, nothing unusual ever happened. Until the storm people would still be talking about generations later. Rain fell so hard it drowned conversation. The river rose over its banks, trees snapped in the darkness. By midnight, every boatman in town had gone home. No crossing was worth risking your life. Then someone knocked on Elias's door. The visitor was a woman, at least. That's what people assumed. She wore a dark hood. Her clothes were soaked with rain. She claimed her husband was stranded across the river. She begged Elias to help. The neighbors later swore they saw the woman standing on his porch, but years afterward, something strange emerged. Everyone remembered seeing her, yet nobody could describe her. Not her face, not her age, not even the sound of her voice. It was as if the details slipped away the moment they tried to recall them. Despite the storm, Elias agreed to help. He grabbed his lantern, stepped into the darkness, and followed the woman toward the river. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. By morning, the storm had passed. The river was calm, but Elias was gone. Search parties combed the banks for days. They found broken ropes, pieces of the ferry dock, even part of his boat, but no body, no lantern, and no sign of the woman. Eventually, the town buried an empty coffin, an empty grave, and life continued, at least on the surface. A month later, a farmer named Walter Finch became lost in heavy fog. Walter knew every road around Cahaba, yet somehow, he couldn't find his way home. Then he saw a lantern, a single light glowing in the distance. The lantern drifted ahead of him, never rushing, never stopping. Walter followed, and moments later found himself standing at the edge of an abandoned well hidden beneath weeds. One more step, and he would have fallen to his death. The lantern vanished. Walter never forgot it. Over the years, similar stories spread across Alabama. Hunters lost in unfamiliar woods, travelers wandering flooded roads, fishermen trapped by fog, all reporting the same thing. The lantern appeared only when they were lost, and it always led them somewhere important, a hidden danger, a forgotten path, a place they needed to see. The stories became so common that locals gave the figure a name, the Lantern Keeper. Then came the account that transformed a ghost story into a legend. A merchant named Samuel Reed became lost one autumn evening. Hours later, he returned to town pale and trembling. For 3 days he refused to speak. When he finally did, the entire town listened. Samuel claimed the lantern had guided him to the cemetery, to the grave of Elias Crow, the empty grave, the one that contained no body. And standing beside it was a man holding a lantern. People asked if it was Elias. Samuel said yes. Then he revealed the detail that made the room fall silent. The ferryman wasn't looking at him. He wasn't looking at the grave. He was staring beyond it, toward the darkness, as if waiting for someone, watching for someone, searching. Who? People asked. Samuel's answer became part of the legend forever. The woman, according to Samuel. The ferryman whispered the words only once, softly. like someone repeating a name they'd spent years trying not to forget. Then both the man and the lantern disappeared. As decades passed, Cahaba itself faded away. Floods returned, businesses closed, families left, nature swallowed the streets, the town became ruins, but the stories remained. Then one spring, after unusually heavy flooding, workers discovered a wreck buried deep in river mud. Many believed it was Elias's ferry. Inside the remains of the boat, they found an iron lantern, old, rust-covered, yet unmistakable. The lantern was carried into town and displayed for everyone to see. Hundreds came to look at it. Some touched it, others refused. No one knew whether it truly belonged to Elias, until an elderly woman stepped forward. She stared at the lantern for a long time, then quietly said something that no one forgot. "My grandmother warned me about this." When asked what she meant, the woman told a story passed through her family for generations, a story older than the legend itself. According to her grandmother, the mysterious visitor who appeared during the storm wasn't asking Elias to help her husband. She wasn't asking for help at all. She was lost, not on the river, not in the woods, lost between worlds. And somehow, Elias followed her where no living man was meant to go. The crowd laughed. Some dismissed it as superstition, others weren't so sure. But before anyone could ask more questions, the old woman pointed toward the river bank, and everyone turned. A lantern was glowing in the distance, far beyond the town, moving slowly through the fog, the exact same way witnesses had described for generations. When they looked back, the recovered lantern was gone. To this day, the ruins of Cahaba attract visitors from all over the country. Most leave with photographs, some leave with stories, but locals still repeat the same warning, because they believe the lantern keeper is searching for the woman who came to his door that stormy night, and they say if he ever mistakes you for her, the lantern won't lead you home. It will follow you home. And once it does, people claim they sometimes see its light outside their window, standing perfectly still, waiting to be recognized. Every ghost town has a story, a fire, a flood, a tragedy. But the people living near Ash Hollow tell a different story. They talk about a woman carrying a suitcase, a woman who still walks the abandoned railroad tracks long after the town itself was forgotten. And according to the legend, if she ever stops and asks you a question, you should answer carefully, because nobody knows what she's carrying, and nobody knows who she's really waiting for. Long before Ash Hollow became a ghost town, it was a busy railroad settlement nestled between the hills. The town wasn't wealthy, but it was alive. Trains arrived every day, merchants filled the streets, children played near the station. For years, the railroad was the heart of everything. Then one autumn, a young woman named Eleanor Voss arrived. She came alone, carrying a weathered leather suitcase, no family, no friends, no explanation. She rented a room above the general store and found work at the station. Before long, everyone in town knew her. Not because she was unusual, because she was predictable. Every evening, without fail, she walked to the platform and waited. At first, people assumed she was expecting someone. Eventually, they asked. Eleanor always gave the same answer. She was waiting for a man who promised he would return. A man who had boarded a train months earlier. A man she loved. The answer never changed, neither did the routine. Rain, snow, summer heat, it didn't matter. Every evening she waited beside the tracks, watching, listening, hoping. Years passed. Then disaster struck. A fire tore through part of the town. Businesses closed. Families moved away. The railroad shifted operations elsewhere. Ash Hollow began to die. Yet Eleanor stayed. Even after trains stopped arriving, even after weeds swallowed the tracks, even after most of the town stood empty, she continued waiting, every evening, at the same place, at the same hour. Then one winter, she vanished. No note, no farewell, no footprints leading away. Only an empty room above the store, and her suitcase, still sitting beside the platform. The townspeople searched for weeks, nothing. No trace of Eleanor was ever found. Eventually, Ash Hollow itself became abandoned, and Eleanor faded into local memory, at least for a while. Years later, a hunter passing through the ruins reported seeing a woman standing beside the old railroad tracks, holding a suitcase. The same suitcase, the same woman, exactly as she had appeared decades earlier. The hunter approached. The woman turned toward him and asked a single question. "Has it arrived yet?" Before he could answer, she disappeared. More sightings followed. Campers, travelers, explorers, all describing the same encounter, the same suitcase, the same question. Has it arrived yet? Then another pattern emerged. A strange one. People who answered her question often began having dreams, not nightmares. Dreams, always the same. An empty train station, a distant whistle, a train approaching through thick fog, and Eleanor standing on the platform, waiting. But over time, the dreams changed. The train drew closer, the whistle grew louder, and some dreamers began noticing a figure standing inside one of the windows, watching them. Not Eleanor, someone else. Someone whose face became impossible to remember after waking. The stories might have remained nothing more than local folklore, if not for a discovery made decades later. A group of historians exploring the station uncovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside were dozens of old letters. Most had been damaged by time, but one survived, and it revealed something nobody in Ash Hollow had ever known. The man Eleanor had been waiting for had tried to return. He boarded a train. He was on his way home. Then somewhere beyond the hills, a bridge collapsed during a storm. The train plunged into a river. Many passengers died. The railroad quietly buried the incident. Families were informed. Records vanished. Life moved on. Except nobody ever told Eleanor. Suddenly, the legend made sense. The waiting, the platform, the years of hope. People pitied her. And for a while, the mystery seemed solved. Then came the account that changed everything. An explorer camping near the station claimed he saw Eleanor one foggy evening, standing beside the tracks, suitcase in hand, waiting, just as the stories described. Then a train whistle echoed through the valley. The tracks had been abandoned for nearly a century, yet the sound was unmistakable. A train, approaching. The explorer watched in disbelief as a faint light appeared in the fog, far down the tracks, growing brighter, closer, closer still. Eleanor smiled, for the first time. The light stopped near the platform. A door seemed to open, though there was no train, no engine, no cars, only fog and light. Then a figure stepped out, tall, silent, its face hidden by shadow. The figure extended a hand. Eleanor looked at it for a long moment, then slowly shook her head and stepped back. The light disappeared, the whistle faded, and the figure was gone. Eleanor remained, still standing beside the tracks, still waiting. When the explorer told his story, locals became divided. Some believed the figure was the man she'd loved, finally returning. Others believed something else, something that had learned exactly who Eleanor was waiting for, something that knew exactly what face she wanted to see. Today, Ash Hollow is little more than broken foundations and rusted rails, but the stories remain. Visitors still report seeing Eleanor beside the old station after sunset, still carrying the suitcase, still asking the same question. Has it arrived yet? And locals still follow one rule: never tell her yes. Because they say if Eleanor ever believes the train has finally arrived, she'll open the suitcase she's been carrying all these years. And nobody knows what's inside, not even the legends, only that whatever it is, she has spent a lifetime making sure it never reaches its destination. Most ghost towns are places where time seems to stand still. But according to the old stories, time doesn't stand still in Red Mercy. It disappears. Just a minute here, a minute there. Small enough that most people never notice, until they visit the ruins and hear a clock ticking somewhere in the darkness. The locals have a rule: if you hear the ticking after sunset, don't follow it. Because they say every clock inside the old workshop is counting toward the same moment. And every visitor who enters leaves behind a little more time than they brought with them. Long before Red Mercy became a ghost town, it was one of the busiest mining settlements in the desert. The streets were crowded, the saloons were full, freight wagons arrived daily, and at the center of town stood a small clock shop owned by a man named Gabriel Thorne. Gabriel wasn't wealthy, he wasn't powerful, but everyone knew his name, because every clock in Red Mercy eventually found its way into his hands. Church clocks, railroad timers, pocket watches. If it measured time, Gabriel could repair it. Some claimed his clocks were so precise they never lost a second. Others joked he understood time better than most people understood themselves. Then one spring, a woman named Rose Mercer arrived. She came from somewhere far beyond the desert. Nobody knew exactly where, only that Gabriel fell in love almost immediately, and for the first time in his life, the clockmaker seemed happier than the clocks he repaired. The townspeople expected a wedding, a family, a future. Instead, they got a funeral. Rose became ill. No doctor could explain why. Within weeks, she was confined to bed. Within months, she was gone. The church bell rang that evening. The entire town gathered to mourn, but Gabriel never attended. Instead, he locked himself inside his workshop. For days, the sound of hammering echoed through town. Metal, gears, springs, ticking, always ticking. When people asked what he was building, he gave the same answer every time: "I'm making more time." Then one morning, the workshop fell silent. The townspeople forced the door open. Gabriel was gone. No note, no tracks, no explanation, and every clock inside the building had stopped. Not at random, not at different times. Every clock showed exactly the same moment, 7:14 p.m., the exact minute Rose Mercer died. Gabriel was never seen again, at least, not officially. Months later, a traveler passing through Red Mercy reported hearing a clock ticking after sunset. Slow, steady, precise. The sound seemed to come from Gabriel's abandoned workshop, a building that should have been empty. Yet warm light glowed beneath the door. The traveler approached, knocked once, and heard a voice answer, "You're early." Inside stood a man surrounded by clocks, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, everyone ticking in perfect rhythm. The traveler recognized the man immediately. Old photographs hanging in town identified him, Gabriel Thorne, exactly as he had looked decades earlier, no older, no younger, unchanged. Then something strange happened. Every clock stopped at once. The lights vanished, and the workshop became an empty ruin again. The traveler left town the next morning, but years later, he noticed something odd. His pocket watch was always 1 minute slow, no matter how many times he repaired it, no matter how often he reset it. Eventually, others reported the same thing. Visitors who claimed to hear the ticking often returned home with clocks running 1 minute behind. Watches, kitchen clocks, Alarm clocks. It didn't matter. 1 minute missing. Always 1 minute. At first, people dismissed it as coincidence, until a historian uncovered dozens of journals written across nearly 80 years. Different authors, different decades, different visitors. Yet every account described the same thing. The clocks inside Gabriel's workshop never displayed the current time. Every clock showed 7:13 p.m., always 1 minute before Rose's death, never after. The discovery transformed the legend. People no longer believed Gabriel was repairing clocks. They believed he was trying to stop something. A single minute. The final minute before he lost the woman he loved. Then came the account that turned the story into folklore. A surveyor became stranded during a desert sandstorm, searching for shelter. He entered the workshop. Inside, the ticking was deafening. Thousands of clocks, thousands of moving gears, all counting towards something. Then Gabriel appeared. The clockmaker looked at the surveyor and asked a simple question. "Do you know what time it is?" The surveyor checked his watch. 7:13 p.m. Gabriel smiled. A tired smile. The kind worn by someone who had been waiting far too long. "Good," he said. "Then there's still a minute left." Suddenly, every clock in the workshop began ticking faster. The sound filled the room, the walls, the air. The surveyor later claimed it felt as if the clocks were pulling something from him. Not blood, not breath. Something else. Something impossible to name. Time. He ran. When he finally reached safety, his watch had stopped. Frozen forever at 7:14 p.m. Years later, he noticed something else. The date on old photographs no longer matched his memories. Events seemed slightly misplaced. Conversations happened earlier than he remembered. Birthdays felt wrong, as if tiny pieces of his past had been shifted by exactly 1 minute. And according to local legend, he wasn't the only one. The oldest residents of the region tell a story. They claim Gabriel's workshop contains a clock for every person who has ever entered. Each visitor leaves behind 1 minute, one memory, one tiny fragment of time, and every stolen minute winds another clock, keeping Gabriel's impossible machine running, keeping the moment alive, keeping Rose alive for just 1 minute longer. Today, Red Mercy is little more than abandoned streets and crumbling buildings slowly disappearing into the desert. But locals still follow the same rule. If you hear a clock ticking among the ruins after sunset, don't follow the sound. Because they say Gabriel Thorne is still trying to save the woman he lost, still collecting minutes, still holding back 7:14 p.m., and they believe that when every clock inside the workshop finally strikes the same time, the minute Gabriel has been protecting for more than a century will finally end. The question is, what happens to all the stolen time when it does? Most ghost towns have empty buildings. Dry Creek has one that isn't supposed to be empty, at least according to the old stories. They say that on certain nights, a lamp appears in the window of the town's abandoned hotel, a hotel that hasn't welcomed a guest in more than a century. And the people living near the ruins still follow one rule. If you see the lamp burning after midnight, don't go inside. Because according to the legend, the innkeeper is still waiting for someone to check out. And nobody knows what happens when he finally does. Long before Dry Creek became a ghost town, it was a busy frontier settlement. Wagons passed through daily. Miners stopped for supplies. Travelers spent nights before continuing west. And standing at the center of town was the Silver Star Hotel. The hotel was owned by a man named Nathan Hale. Not a sheriff, not a politician, just an innkeeper. But everyone in Dry Creek knew him. Nathan remembered every guest, every face, every room, every name written into his registry. People trusted him. Because Nathan had a reputation. No traveler was ever turned away. Not during storms, not during droughts, not even when they couldn't pay. if someone needed a place to sleep. Nathan found them a room. For years, the hotel prospered. Then, one winter evening, a stranger arrived. The man came just before sunset, alone, covered in dust from the road. He carried no luggage, no horse, no supplies, only a small black ledger tucked beneath one arm. Nathan offered him a room. The stranger accepted, signed the guest book, and climbed the stairs. No one saw him come back down. The next morning, Nathan went to collect payment. Room 7 was empty, the bed untouched, the window locked from the inside, and the guest gone. At first, nobody thought much of it. Travelers disappeared all the time in those days. The frontier was dangerous. Life moved on, until Nathan checked the registry. The stranger's name was gone. Not crossed out, not faded. Gone. The page remained. The ink from every other guest remained. But the line containing the stranger's name had vanished completely, as though it had never been written. Nathan became obsessed. He questioned everyone who had been at the hotel that night. Most remembered seeing the stranger, but nobody could describe him clearly. Not his face, not his voice, not even the color of his clothes. Only that he had been there. The more Nathan searched, the less anyone remembered. Years passed. Dry Creek slowly declined. The mines dried up. Businesses closed. Families moved away. Eventually, the town became another forgotten dot on an old map. But Nathan never left. Long after everyone else abandoned Dry Creek, the innkeeper remained inside the Silver Star Hotel, still maintaining the rooms, still updating the registry, still searching for the missing guest. Then, one day, Nathan disappeared too. When neighboring ranchers checked the hotel, they found it abandoned. Dust covered the furniture. The dining room sat empty. And Nathan was nowhere to be found. Only one thing looked untouched. The guest registry, open on the front desk, waiting. The townspeople assumed Nathan had finally left, until the sightings began. A traveler passing through Dry Creek claimed he saw light inside the hotel, warm yellow light, like a lantern. Curious, he entered. Inside stood an elderly innkeeper behind the front desk. Checking in, the man asked. The traveler immediately recognized him from old photographs. Nathan Hale, exactly as he had looked decades earlier. Startled, the traveler backed away. The lantern flickered, and suddenly the hotel was empty again. Dark, silent, abandoned. Over the years, similar stories spread throughout the region. People reported seeing lights in the windows, hearing footsteps in empty hallways, finding fresh entries written inside the guest registry, always in the same handwriting, Nathan's. Then another detail emerged. Visitors who entered the hotel often claimed they lost memories. Not major memories, small ones, a forgotten conversation, a missing afternoon, a face that suddenly seemed unfamiliar, always something connected to a person. At first, the stories sounded unrelated, until a schoolteacher uncovered something strange. While researching Dry Creek's history, she located the original guest registry, or what remained of it. Hundreds of names filled the pages: travelers, merchants, prospectors, families. Then she noticed something impossible. Every few pages, a name had vanished, not faded, not erased, gone, exactly like the stranger's, and beside each missing name, Nathan had written the same note. Still searching. The discovery transformed the legend. People no longer believed Nathan was running a haunted hotel. They believed he was keeping records, waiting for someone, tracking someone, searching for the one guest who never checked out. Then came the account that turned the story into folklore. A historian spent the night inside the Silver Star Hotel hoping to document paranormal activity. Near dawn, He heard footsteps descending the staircase. Nathan appeared carrying an old lantern. The innkeeper stopped beside the registry, turned a page, and smiled. For the first time in over a century. "Found you," he whispered. The historian looked down. A name had appeared on the page, freshly written, still wet with ink. Before he could read it, the lantern went out. The room vanished into darkness. When morning arrived, the registry was blank. Every page, every name, gone. The historian never revealed what he saw written there. He only told people one thing. It wasn't the stranger. Then he refused to speak about Dry Creek ever again. Today, the Silver Star Hotel still stands among the ruins of Dry Creek. Most visitors avoid it. Some don't. But locals continue passing down the same warning. If you see a lamp glowing in the hotel window after midnight, keep driving, because according to the legend, Nathan Hale is still searching for the guest who disappeared from room 7. The problem is, after all these years, people aren't sure whether he's trying to find that guest or become him. And they say that if you ever open the registry and find your own name inside, you should leave immediately, because the next time someone sees the lamp, one name will be missing, and it might be yours. A historian spent the night inside the Silver Star Hotel hoping to document paranormal activity. Near dawn, he heard footsteps descending the staircase. Nathan appeared carrying an old lantern. The innkeeper stopped beside the registry, turned a page, and smiled. For the first time in over a century. "Found you," he whispered. The historian looked down. A name had appeared on the page, freshly written, still wet with ink. Before he could read it, the lantern went out. The room vanished into darkness. When morning arrived, the registry was blank. Every page, every name, gone. The historian never revealed what he saw written there. He only told people one thing. It wasn't the stranger. Then he refused to speak about Dry Creek ever again. Today, the Silver Star Hotel still stands among the ruins of Dry Creek. Most visitors avoid it. Some don't. But locals continue passing down the same warning. If you see a lamp glowing in the hotel window after midnight, keep driving, because according to the legend, Nathan Hale is still searching for the guest who disappeared from room 7. The problem is, after all these years, people aren't sure whether he's trying to find that guest or become him. And they say that if you ever open the registry and find your own name inside, you should leave immediately, because the next time someone sees the lamp, one name will be missing, and it might be yours.